Well, welcome back. Wisdom Thursday. Today we're looking at Proverbs chapter 14. Lots of different ideas going on through this chapter, and we're going to zoom in on one of those, and that is the theme of friendship. If you haven't read Proverbs 14, press pause now and then come back to us. Okay, so the theme of friendship jumps out in 3 verses throughout this chapter. We see the foolish way of friendship, and we see the wise way of friendship. So firstly, let's have a look at the foolish way of friendship. We see that in verse 20. This is the foolish way, the world's way of friendship. Verse 20 says this: "The poor are shunned even by their neighbors, but the rich have many friends." Now, this verse shouldn't be interpreted as an instruction. It's not saying to be wise we should befriend the rich and ignore the poor. It's actually the opposite. It's just an observation of the way things are. That the poor are shunned by their neighbours, but the rich have many friends. And I think this still rings true today. People are more likely to befriend someone who has means. Most people would prefer a friend who can give back to them, reciprocate with invites, make them look better, improve their status, and so on. People struggle to make friends with people who are poor because they don't appear to be able to offer much in return. But I think people are quick to make friends with the rich because it can be advantageous for them. But we can even broaden this out beyond just the financial means. We often prefer to make friends with high social status, or further up the corporate ladder than us, or better communication skills, or those who are easier to get along with, or people who fit in with the parameters of what we think it means to be a good person or be living a good life. But when we look at Jesus, we see something different, don't we? Jesus was called a friend of sinners, one who left the comfort and the beauty of his heavenly home to save and befriend the broken. And then Philippians 2 calls us to do the same, to have that same attitude, to lower ourselves down, to befriend and to care for those, just like Jesus did. And Jesus' own brother James even tells us in James chapter 2 that we should be warned against favoritism, calling us to be impartial to those that we welcome. So that's the foolish way, the world's way of friendship. What's the wisdom around friendship? What's the wise way? What's God's way? Well, how would God have us behave towards others? We see it in 2 verses. Firstly, verse 21 says, "It is a sin to despise one's neighbor, but blessed is the one who is kind to the needy." You notice how that's a reversal of verse 20? The word neighbor is in there again. And instead of being shunned and despised, here the neighbor is cared for. The poor neighbor is cared for and in a generous way. And this is the work of a blessed person, a wise person, a person who knows God. Instead of shunning and despising their poor neighbor, they will care for them. They will give to them. And then let's look at verse 31. "Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God." And this verse is reminding us of something that is quite commonly mentioned in the Bible, that the way we treat the poor and needy is an indication, or not is an indication, the way we treat the poor and needy is how we treat God. To care for those in need is to honor God. But to ignore those, to oppress them, is to show contempt to our Maker. Think about that for a sec. That's big, isn't it? Jesus said the same thing, though, didn't he? We hear the parable of the sheep and the goats, and at the end they say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or naked or thirsty and come and visit you, feed you, clothe you?" And he said, "Whatever you did do, whatever you didn't do for the least of these, you did or didn't do for me." The way we treat the poor is the way we treat God. The extent to which we love the poor is the extent to which we love God. Now let me remind you that we're not saved by the way we treat the poor. We should know that. It's salvation by grace. We're made right with God through the work of his Son on our behalf. But the way we treat the poor is a clear indication of whether or not we actually know God. And that's a heavy truth to swallow. I know it is for me. I think it's worth finishing today by taking time to reflect on who you're befriending and why. Are you honoring God through your friendships? Are you being generous to those who are in need? Because these verses show us that wisdom is loving your neighbour, befriending your neighbour, caring for your neighbour, being generous towards your neighbour, even when they can give nothing in return. Pray that God will challenge you through this word today and encourage you to walk in step with His Spirit as you seek to honour God through the way you love others around you. And go in God's peace.